Welcome to She Loves the Grid, where we discuss all things F1. Whether it's happening on the track, in the paddock, or beyond the grid, we'll talk about it all. And welcome back to She Loves the Grid. It's our second summer episode? I feel like it's been like a year.
I woke up this morning thinking I'm over it. I miss racing. I miss racing so much. This is like the accidental spring one that, break that we had. I think everybody's having withdrawals. Nobody has any content to share online.
No, but I have to tell you, I'm looking forward to when we get to the segment on Williams because it was just neat digging and I'd taken notes from before to get ready for it. I went back and went through them all and finished up, and it's just it made me miss it even more, actually. But I'm going to enjoy digging through each team, and I don't know what I'm going to do next year, and unless we just don't get all the teams this year, or when we get new teams, we'll have to dig through drivers. This is fun. I'm loving the history aspect of it. But let's get going. How was your week?
It was good. The usual. I actually finally went and saw Barbie. I feel like my friend and I were the last two people.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I never leave the house. Claire's like a homebody. I never leave the house. So.
Well, same, but listen, I had to get out to see this one because I wanted to hear what all the hype, was about, and I absolutely loved it. So I highly recommend going and seeing it. I think there's a lot of interesting messages in the movie, and you just leave. I feel like I'm a girl's girl anyways, or I really tried to be, but I feel like you leave it thinking like, yeah, we all need to support each other. And yeah, it's a really good movie. I highly recommend going to see it. I know you can find an English version there, but.
Oh yeah. I'm learning German, so we'll figure it out.
How about you?
It was good. It's been between, doing the German classes, and I've started saying this week, and I'm going to keep doing it. I think it's going to be my new little term. I'm looking for a new apartment because when we moved here, part of moving to Germany, getting an apartment, I had to wait for my job to move here. I had to get my visa to be able to officially work in Germany. And now that I am, I can officially get a longer term apartment because the one I'm in now is one that they would rent to an expat without a German work contract.
Yeah.
But apartment finding in Germany, as I've shared with you, is a competitive sport, as I like to call it. It's not like the US where you just go to an apartment complex and apply, or go find a house and apply. It's literally having to have all the right apps, jump on the first one, present yourself almost in a portfolio of why I'm the better candidate kind of thing, like you're interviewing for a job, So it's been a hunt. So I went to see a couple this week, and I've got application in on 2 with the same place that, hopefully we'll get one of them. So he'll here this week, and I have to literally pay for 2 apartments at the same time for 2 months, but it'll make the move easier.
It'll be worth it.
It will. And the weather actually warmed up. I wore shorts for part of yesterday, and I'm in shorts today. So
nice.
It's already starting to get chilly again. So as soon as we get done recording, and it's Sundays, most people who are just joining us, we always record on Sundays, usually after the race, but we just keep that tradition. I will be back in long pants here right after this because I'm already starting to get cold.
Yeah. But it is getting to be nighttime there, right? So
it's 5:37 already. So it's it's a Sunday afternoon for us because I'm 9 hours ahead of you there in Arizona.
Yeah, it's crazy. I wake up and most of your day is already done.
I know. When I got up this morning, I was like doing the math. I'm like, it's like 1:30 in the morning for you.
I was sound asleep. And then this morning I forgot to water my plants yesterday, and I think we're having a little dip in temperature. It's, in 105. I don't know what that is in, whatever your language is. And but it's been kind of funny because the last couple of mornings I've gone out, around 6 or whatever to water plants. And I'm like, ooh, it feels kind of chilly out here. It's like fall is a coming. And then I come back inside and I look at the temperature and it's like 92, 94, something like that.
Yeah, we got up to 80 82, I think, or 83, close to
Oh,
that. No,
that's
not
your
even
high.
80. No, I don't think we made it to 80. Yeah.
That's your high, and at 6 a.m. it's like already hotter than that here. I'm over it.
Yeah, I think we're getting to 82 today. I think that was our high today.
That is ideal. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect weather. Why do I live in it?
I lost my layer of blubber and insulation, so I'm like freezing all the time. Let's get into it because I've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about when we get
I
to
know,
the team.
and I cannot wait to learn more about Williams. I love Williams. I think they're awesome. I titled this episode "We Are Williams" because that is their hashtag. We are Williams. And
hopefully maybe somebody from Williams will come watch me talk about their history.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Okay, so here's some fun facts for you to get started today. So in the first half of the season, the drivers with the most lap gains on the first lap, kind of interesting. So Logan Sargent has gained 16 positions on a first lap. Yuki is in second with 13. You've got George with 11, and then Alex and Kevin Magnussen each with 10. So, I mean, generally they're starting further back. So that is why, you tend to have a lot of gains maybe on that first lap. You can jump. But I love that it does show that right off the start, they are getting going immediately. Like they're passing people, left and right on that initial jump. So love that. As far as the most positions gained for the first half, like throughout, I guess like an entire race, again, through the first half of the season, this should not be a surprise. Checo with 59. So we've talked a lot about Checo having terrible qualifying. I mean, how many did he not even make it to Q3? So he's been starting towards the back, but finishing in the points and sometimes on the podium. So 59 should not be a surprise that Checo has the most positions gained so far.
He's only finished below 10th in Red Bull because it's like a 16th in one race. So just one time. All the other times he's been up. Yeah.
Yeah. And with those really horrible starting points on the grid, he's doing great. Then you have George with 36. So again, we talked about him being very slow and methodical. And I think also their strategy where he's started from the back quite often, but working his way up. So to me, when I saw that, I was like, this doesn't really seem to be a surprise. Then you have Max with 27, Lance with 18, Logan with 17, and then Yuki with 16. So Yuki in both of those.
Max. Well, Max is because he's had a couple of penalties, I think, that made him start back. One I know recently made him start back several.
Yeah. I don't know. Pretty cool. I love to see, like I said, I love seeing Yuki and Logan even in there in a couple of those. So they're making moves. They're doing what they can with their cars. Okay. I wanted to talk about really quickly about silly season because this is about the time like it should be starting. I feel like maybe we're even a little bit behind, but F1 put out a cool graphic this week talking about, sorry, my dog is like standing here like, hello, pet me. Hi, buddy. I wish I could show him. Anyways, they put out a cool graphic this week showing all of the potentially open seats for 2024. So for Williams, you have Logan's seat. So these are all people that have contracts that, are only good through this year. So for Williams, you have Logan's seat. Alfa Romeo, you have Zhou. Haas, both Kevin and Nico. AlphaTauri, both Daniel and Yuki. And then Mercedes, Lewis. So allegedly, Ferrari's principal, Fred, kind of talked to Lewis about making a move, but Lewis declined. I think the Ferrari CEO had reached out previously too, and Lewis declined. But we haven't heard anything about Lewis actually having a signed contract with Mercedes. There's been a lot of talk from him and from Toto, like these things take time and we're working on it and it's basically a done deal, like he's not going to go anywhere, but we still don't have any confirmation yet. So I think, that's why they do have that open. Technically his contract is up. at the end of this year? And will he stay? Are they having problems? Are they just, putting out good faith that it will get done, but maybe they're stalled? I have no idea.
Where would you think he'd go though? Where would Lewis go if he didn't stay with Mercedes? I just can't.
Know. That's the
So
thing.
where he would go.
I mean, you wouldn't go to Ferrari because Charles just supposedly signed an extension on his contract. We've talked a lot, and we'll talk about Carlos here in a second, but we talked a lot about Charles is their guy. And so he's always going to be the priority. So I can't imagine you're Lewis, you go there. If you're Lewis, you're not going to go to a Haas. You're not going to go to an Alfa Romeo. Like,
would he go to Red Bull?
No. Like, why would you play second fiddle to Max?
I mean, but not second fiddle. I mean, would he go? I mean, that rivalry. I mean, I have stuff to say about that while I talk about Williams. But I mean, it is because of the car. I'm just thinking of the car. He wants a solid performing car.
Yeah.
And the Red Bull currently is. Could you imagine Lewis in the RB? Like, could you imagine?
No, and I think he even said something about that. If he was in the RB, Max wouldn't be winning as much. I swear I saw that someplace. I hope I did not just make that up in my head.
I don't know if he said it, but I'm thinking it. Like, if there's a few drivers, if they were second seat or the second car, I wouldn't say second seat, the second car in Red Bull, Max would not be winning as much. There are a couple of drivers way more consistent than Checo.
I mean, I agree with that 100%, but I just cannot picture a Lewis and a Max. I mean, we thought there were issues when Checo was doing well at the beginning of the season. Who's going to, is Christian Horner going to let them duke it out? Could you imagine Lewis and Max like duking it out? Christian would be gray by the end of the season. And those two, I mean, they had that rivalry going on. And it seems to be cool, whatever. But you go up again, Max is not going to let anybody, whoever is in that second seat, beat him. He's got that competitive gene. So I honestly don't know where else he would go. I mean, none of the teams that have a seat open, that's for sure. I mean, unless the only thing we never know is when does Lance Stroll's contract expire? Nobody knows that information. So could Lance retire? And I could totally see Papa Stroll bringing Lewis in. You have two world champions on your team. You're improving your car. We know they've got this new facility, this new wind tunnel. Hopefully they weren't one of the cars that busted the cost cap. But
the only other car that looks promising right now is the McLaren, though. But they don't have the seats. So, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. But they adore Lando. But speaking of, like, Lando supposedly has pre-contracts with the entire grid. Like, everybody from Red Bull to Ferrari to Mercedes, like, who knows? I think Lando is happy to stay with McLaren now that the car is doing well. So I don't see them, kind of getting rid of that. And then I mentioned Charles supposedly has signed an extension. But there's a lot of rumors this past week, and I've avoided posting it on our social media, like reposting it, because I just don't want to promote it. Anyways, but I think that this rumor could absolutely be true. So the rumor is that Carlos Sainz has signed a pre-contract with Audi to join the Sauber team in 2025. I don't know if they come on the grid in 2025, they take over Alfa Romeo, or it's 2026. But anyways, it could be accurate. One thing to remember with pre-contracts is that they are not legally binding. His current Ferrari contract does go through next year, so through 2024. In Spa, Carlos said, I'm going to read it to you because I don't want to mess it up. I do prefer starting a season already knowing where I'm going to be the following year. The goal is to go into 2024 without any worries about it, and my contract for the future already signed and sealed. So he's thinking by the end of this year, he wants to go into the next year, finish out his year with Ferrari, either stay with Ferrari or he already knows where he's going to go, which makes sense. He has said in the past, like, he doesn't want, like, if he's focusing on where is he supposed to be, where is he going to go next, talking about negotiations, then his mind isn't on racing and he just wants to focus on the racing. So here's another reason why I think this could be true. Andreas is the CEO now of Sauber Motorsport. He was the principal at McLaren when Carlos was there, and he's a huge fan of Carlos. And supposedly he has said that he would build the Sauber program around Carlos if he was given the opportunity, which kind of goes back to what you were saying last week when you put him on the driver that's struggling list. And if you did listen to that episode, go back and listen to our recap of that, because maybe that is what he needs, is to be the number one driver at, on a team. And they're willing to build it around him. So that, I think, would be very, very intriguing to Carlos if he's smart, because he's tired of playing second banana for Charles. And with Charles signing that contract extension, they're going to keep prioritizing Charles in the races. Okay, second or third reason, I don't even know where I'm at. Another reason that I think that this could be accurate is his dad, Carlos Sainz Sr., has very close ties to Audi. And I think he either races for them or has raced for them in the past, but apparently he's got a lot of influence there. And so, like, kind of keep it in the family, right? Like, Carlos Jr. would go to Sauber, Audi, whatever. So I think this could be very, very accurate. At the very least, he could use it as a way to, negotiate with Ferrari. But I think, like, what's not to like? That Andreas is awesome. Loved him. He believes in Carlos. Maybe Carlos needs that place where he is the number one driver and can really shine. I don't know. Just a thought.
I agree, because we've seen that. We've seen him just playing second fiddle, and he's too smart of a driver, and he knows what he needs to do. He doesn't have trust. I don't think he's got trust in his current team.
No, why would you? He's terrible at strategy.
But at least two of his fines have been because his engineer didn't warn him about something, or his penalties rather, which set him back.
Well, Charles, for sure that happened too. So I think if you're a driver, you also, like, in those situations where they're not communicating with you, the strategy is crap and you're having to create your own strategy, I think you have to take all of that into effect, not just what's happening to you personally, but what is the other driver also experiencing. And Charles is their preferred driver, and they keep screwing him over left and right. So, I think you do it. But then my question is, being, somewhat newer to this sport, and Carlos is my driver and Ferrari is my team. If he leaves, is Ferrari still my team, but Carlos is my driver? Or do I now become, like, how does this work? I do like
multiple teams.
Huh?
You like me and you like multiple teams.
I do like multiple teams, but Ferrari has been, like, my main team.
Yeah.
So I will still like them, don't get me wrong, but I might have to switch all my merch out. Although I was in the grocery store yesterday, and usually here when I wear my Ferrari gear, like, nobody pays attention and says anything, which is always super disappointing to me. But I was in the grocery store, and a lady that worked there came down the aisle, and she's like, "Oh, I saw a pop of red, and I wondered if you were wearing a Ferrari shirt." Like, she came to search me out. And I'm like, "It is a Ferrari shirt." She goes, "And it's Carlos Sainz," because I had my 55 on the back. And I'm like, "He's the best." She's like, "I love him." And I was like, this is the best trip to the grocery store ever. Nobody ever acknowledges my Ferrari gear. Nobody talks about F1 around here. So that just
we may have gained a follower while I was interviewing someone for a job because they had F1 in their profile, something they liked.
Amazing. Okay, so before we head into Williams, I thought this, like the deep dive, I thought this would be kind of good. So Williams principal James Vowles, if you don't watch his videos, like, he does them usually after the race, and he kind of was doing a preseason, or a halfway season recap, and he was talking about how they have already started working on things that might take like 12 months or 24 months or 36 months to really complete. But it's going to make them more competitive in the future. And he said the only thing is it could make a compromise on the rest of this season. So maybe they won't be bringing a lot more upgrades to the season while they try to figure out like what they have. They're going to really invest in the future. But just talking about how important it is for them to get back on top. I highly recommend going to listen to the whole thing because that's just a little synopsis. But they really have made some great big changes in the team, and we're seeing them being a little bit more competitive, not in all races yet, but here and there, and they're learning, like they're really trying to figure it out. And he was talking about how that's like changing the culture and all this other stuff, which of course, when you're winning, the culture is going to be way more exciting and better than when you're losing, but they are really focused on the future. So I thought that would be a good way to delve into your thing, talking about the past and Williams
to them. Yeah. So let's talk about to Williams. So Williams was interesting. It was interesting to dig into them. Their team, as most may know, it started by Frank Williams. What I thought was interesting is the team as it is now, excuse me because I just drank soda, is not the original team. So we'll just start. So their official name is Williams Grand Prix Engineering Limited, but we know them as Williams Racing. So the team started, Frank Williams started a team in 1966 called Frank Williams Racing Cars. And I'm just going to do some highlights and then I'll go through the deep stuff. And then in 1976, there was it became Wolf Williams Racing. That actually got sold off, complete tie separation. And then 1977, we got the team we have today, which is Williams Grand Prix Engineering. And that's been the same team ever since.
Oh, okay.
So, separation, change of ownerships. Frank went off and did his own thing and left the original team behind.
Got it.
Bro, and I'll go through that. So their team license is in Britain. They are based in Grove, Oxfordshire, England. Apologies to anyone in the UK if I said that wrong. It's always been based in Britain. Though for 1 year, when they were going through the old way, they named the constructors. They would name the teams based on their chassis and their motor. They were considered Italian because they had an Italian constructor for their chassis.
Oh, interesting.
I thought it was interesting. 1970. So James Voiles, I don't know how you say his name, but he is their current principal. He was the chief strategist at Braun in 2009. Then he was at Mercedes from 2010 to 2022. So he was there for like 12 years.
Yeah.
And then he joined Williams this year. I thought it was interesting that in 2022, he drove with the Asian Le Mans and he finished 17th.
Oh, that's cool.
Otherwise, he's not a driver. He actually has his master's in motorsport engineering and management from Cambridge.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like it.
But the other two key roles that we mentioned in Mercedes, so I'm going to kind of keep it consistent when I do these, is the chief technical officer. That role has not been filled since 2019.
Wow.
They just announced in July, so just a couple of weeks ago, July 23rd, I think it was on FIA's website, that Pat Fry is going to be coming over. So Patty Lowe was there and left in 2019, and Pat Fry is joining on November 1st of this year. So they he's not there, not until November, and he's coming from Alpine.
Interesting. I mean, at the same time, like Alpines, they haven't been great. No. They've had some issues, so okay.
Yeah. He's got 30 years in motorsports. He's been the CTO there just for the last year, though. He's only been there a year. And he's before that 17 years at McLaren.
Interesting. Okay.
And then there's no technical director. Not since DeMason left at the end of last year, along with the previous principal. And that principle came in when the new ownership of the company came in, which I'll get into.
Okay.
So just current kind of numbers, as we know, Logan Sargent and Alex Albon are their current drivers. They're the FW45, which the FW is for Frank Williams. That's what the moniker's for. They do have the Mercedes engine. This current team's first entry was considered in 1977 in the Spanish Grand Prix. As a constructor, it was considered 1978 in the Argentine Grand Prix because they were using other people's parts and whatnot as they officially became a constructor. Then I'll get into that. They've raced as a team 804 entries, 793 as a constructor, 114 victories, 313 podiums, 128 pole positions, and 133 fastest laps. Sad is that none of those chats changed in the last few weeks since I started doing the research.
Aww.
I know. Well, the entries and starts did. The entries and stuff didn't. They've had 9 constructors championships.
That's awesome. I think that's one of the most, right?
Yeah, and 7 drivers championships, which is really cool. So their drivers championships is an Australian, Alan Jones, a Finnish guy, Kiki Rosberg, Nelson Piquet from Brazil.
That's Max's girlfriend's dad, Nelson Piquet.
Piquet. That was in 1987. We know that year well.
He's banned though from F1 after a lot of racist and homophobic comments. Just an FYI.
It's interesting some of the big names that were with Williams. Nigel Mansell with the UK, Alain Prost from France, Damon Hill in '96 with the UK, and then Jacques Villeneuve in 1987 from Canada.
Amazing. So their last one really was in '97. I mean, holy moly.
Yeah, '97. So here's some history with them. So there's some interesting things in here. I won't go through everything I've got, but some interesting stuff. Okay, so again, 1996, Frank Williams started it as Frank Williams Racing Cars. He had a brief career as a driver and a mechanic. He funded this to begin with as his work as a traveling grocery salesman. Is how he funded the team. I thought that was just fascinating. The first couple of years he did F2 and F3, but he bought his first F1 chassis from Brabham and entered an F1 race in 1969. So the team started in 66, but the first F1 was 1969. He started with a Ford Cosworth engine, and they took second place in Monaco and the U.S. Grand Prix.
That's cool.
In that first year. And then that first year they had 6 total top 10 finishes, including those 2. I know.
That's incredible for a first year. That's incredible for a first year.
I know, right? And then so their success attracted Italian sports car manufacturer Di Tommaso, who built their 1970 chassis, but they were uncompetitive for the first 4 races. Unfortunately, in their 5th race, the car flipped and killed the driver Pierre's Courage. It caused a lot of issues between Williams and the drivers. And since they didn't have any good results, the Tommaso partnership dissolved. They had a lot of retires, did not start, did not qualify in that whole year. It was a pretty bad year.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And they continued to struggle with the car design, funds, performance. So just from 71 through 75, they had for 71 and 72, they went with Mark for their chassis. They had 3 finishes in the top 10, then 4 finishes in the top 10. And then the next year, all kinds of drivers. This is what really killed me. In 1973, they had a total of 9 different drivers. Like one consistent one and one like with the next car, just like all kinds of substitutes and flipping out and whatnot. 9 different drivers. It was the ISO Marlboro chassis. They were 10th in the Constructors' Cup, but there was only 12 teams and then 11 spots could play. They had a placement, so they were pretty low.
Yeah.
3 teams in the top 10. The next year, 6 different drivers.
What?
10th in the Constructors again of 20, but only 12 were placed spots. 3 in the top finishes. A lot again, a lot of retirements. A lot of did not qualify. And then 1975 back again for 10 drivers, but this was the first year they introduced a chassis built by Williams. And they were 9th in the Constructors with 3 finishes in the top 10. So pretty rough in those years.
Definitely.
So in 1976, a Canadian oil millionaire, Wolf, he came in and bought 60% of the team.
Wow. So he gave up control.
And that's when they became Wolf Williams Racing. They had 9 drivers that year. It's just fascinated me, the number of drivers. 4 top finishes and then on the top 10. And at the end of the season, Wolf restructured the team and he removed Williams from the manager's role.
Oh.
And Williams was not happy about that. So he's like, that's it. He just sold the rest of his ownership. And then he and Patrick Head left and they formed the current Williams team.
Interesting.
So
Well, this is why you don't give up control of your company and sell 60% of it. If you don't want to be put out, don't give up. Oh my goodness. Okay. So
Walter Wolf Racing, because that's what the name became, only lasted for 3 years after that.
Oh.
Just kind of interesting side note. Okay. So in 1977, he and Patrick had started the team we have today, but they failed to score a point that year. There was nothing. But then in 78, they designed their first Williams car, the true full Williams car. So it was in 79. That's why they started racing 1 year. And then the next year they became a constructor.
Okay.
Is when they obtained their membership in the Formula One Constructors Association.
Oh, okay.
So that's why they became in-ring races as a team 1 year, but the constructor the next year, because they weren't officially a member of the Constructors Cup as the current team. Interestingly enough, in 79, they did not start getting points until the 7th race. Their first win was the British Grand Prix, 25 seconds ahead of the P2.
What? Oh my gosh, it's like maths. Hang on 1 second.
And then in the Germany race, they scored P1 and P2.
Oh my gosh, I am listening. Sorry.
I know. Go on, because we're recording. And then the team scored 59 points and ended up finishing second in the Constructors Cup, which was just fascinating. In 80, they got their first constructors win and their first driver championship. So that's Alan Jones, the Australian. And then they continue on. So then they had an 81 with a constructor win, 82 a drivers championship, 4th in the constructors, 83 4th in the constructors. Then they switched to Honda engines. And in 84. This is where I was telling you earlier before we got started. I really want to analyze how engines have played into teams' success over time. And they actually put the engine in like the last race of the previous year, and they ended up 6th in the constructor. And then in 85, they designed their first car with carbon fiber, which I thought was crazy. That just started in 85.
Yeah.
886, that's when Frank Williams was paralyzed in a car accident. So he was an avid marathoner, and he'd left one of the practices, I think it was, and he was driving to, I think, go get a plane to go to a marathon. I think it was in London, if I remember the story correctly. And he just missed a turn in a car that he was renting, and he just lost control and ended up rolling. And he was pinned, and the person that was with him, pulled him out because they were worried about gas and whatnot. And they airlifted him, and they had to have him repatriated. I think this is how the story had gone. And then they had to put like a trach in and all this to drain his lungs. And he almost died. It was almost a year before he came back to the pits.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. But they went on the next year, got driver and constructor. In 88, this was interesting. They switched to a naturally aspirated Judd engine. And what that means is naturally aspirated. They had no turbocharging. They used just natural atmospheric pressure to put the power behind the engine. Did not do well.
I mean, I don't know anything about engines, but that just doesn't even sound like a good idea.
Yeah, they had gone from being driver and constructor win in 87 to 8th in the Constructors Cup that year.
Oh.
So they moved to Renault engines and went 2nd and 4th. And then Adrian Newey joined.
I remember he was with them.
Yeah.
Way back in the day. That's 1991.
1991. And they ended up 2nd. And then 92 in the off season, they had this interesting little thing where Alan Prost negotiated a deal allowing him that as a driver, he could approve or disapprove any the second driver. he and Ayrton Senna had a beef, and he would not allow Senna to come to Williams. Now, so this was my comment about earlier. What's with these drivers' beefs, man? Like you I don't get to pick who I work with at work. I just have to deal with it. And you like, I'm going to tell you who can and can't work here. So anyway, they promote Damon Hill, who ended up going on later on and winning a championship.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And then, 93, they won driver and constructor. It was interesting in 93, Prost, Senna, and Hill, between, a couple teams, were the only winners of any race except for one that Schumacher had won.
Oh,
so then when we go into 94, they decided that they really wanted to get Senna. And Prost, they're like, well, you know what? He was ready to retire permanently. And then we'll just pay your salary out. You go retire. We really want Ayrton Senna.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's the year the FIA banned electronic driver's aids, which includes active suspension, traction control, ABS, and much of the Williams car had that. And they talked about how the car became really difficult to drive.
Yeah.
And it was in the third race that year in San Marino that Ayrton Senna died.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I was like, wow, I did not realize it was so, coincidental, if you want to call it, or just at that timing. It was a crazy timing. I also didn't realize how long this lasted. Italy tried to charge the team and Frank Williams for manslaughter for Ayrton Senna's death in that race.
I did not know that. Oh,
yes. They did not resolve that and drop everything until 2005. So this happened in 94. It took 11 years to get rid of all of that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was that one blew my mind. I did a lot of research.
It's kind of amazing that they put it all on the car, so they must have had something instead of on that track, because we know that many drivers have died on that track since then. So it wasn't the track they're putting it on the car.
Well, over time, I think over time they finally did.
Yeah.
Then the next race, Damon Hill was the only one from Williams that went out on race, did one lap, and then retired the car, kind of an honor. And here's when I was talking about the new owners, kind of like I won't say the word because I don't want to get us beef for this time, not so nice move. So since his death, up until 2022, every Williams livery had a Senna S on the livery in honor of him and to support the Instituto Ayrton Senna in his honor.
Yeah.
From 2022 onwards, the S was dropped because CEO Capito, the new guy who came in when they bought out, when the investment firm bought out Williams, basically stated it was time to move on.
What? It's Joss Capito, right? So is he still with them, or did he? I don't know.
I think that one I didn't go check up on. I know that the principal and the technical director left. I think Josh might still be around. I'll have to double check that. But yeah, that was some pretty messed up stuff. And that year there was definitely a lot of backup drivers between the crash and the end of the season. But they still came back and had a pretty good. They won the constructor. They still won the constructor that year.
So let me just update, because I did think that he was out, and in December last year he was out at Williams.
Okay, it was last year.
So maybe, and that was just last December, so December 2022. So maybe they will put that S back aside. He said it at the time just felt naturally right to step aside. He said that at most the plan was for him to do the job for 2 years, 3 at the most. Well, so maybe they'll put the S back on. I hope they had it on for the 800th livery. Sorry to sidetrack, but I was thinking he had left.
Well, we should check the livery, and then we should put on a petition to get that back. Because I think that's something that should stay along. I mean, get Richard Mille in there. I mean, like that's something. I didn't know much about F1 and knew about Ayrton Senna. I mean, that's just something. I was like, oh, and then I was like, that is so nice that that's there. I'm going to go look for it. And then there was a researching. But since 2022, I was like, what? The heartless
That
jerk.
is, I think it's sad too if that was his quote, like it's time to move on. I mean, his family doesn't really move on. I mean, he
Well,
was
half
such
the
a
reason,
legend in the sport. Like, how do you just
half of motorsport hasn't moved on beyond that. Yeah. So anyway, we'll keep going. So after that, like I said, but they still, with his wreck and they had a bunch of backup drivers filling in for a part of the season, they still won the Constructors' Cup that year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that blew my mind. I had to go back and check it. I was like, wait, really? And then they got second the next year. In 96, they driver and constructor cup win. Newey left for McLaren. He wanted to be technical director, but with Patrick Head being co-founder and shareholder of the team, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. I bet they are sad about that.
Oh, yeah. Because 97 was the end of their heyday, right? They had their 100th win in 97.
Okay.
They had their driver and constructor win in 97. And interestingly enough, at that time, Ferrari, I don't know if it's changed since then, but Ferrari or Williams became one of 5 teams with 100 wins. So Williams, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull. It's interesting with Williams with those names. If you think about the teams now, back then, how they were performing, no, but now you put Williams in the same vein of those other teams. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They were
crazy. And I think like also just to, when you start heading into that early 2000s and stuff, it's just from a driver championship standpoint, that's when you started having the runs of like the Sebastian Vettels, the Lewis Hamiltons, Michael Schumacher, like they were all like kind of around that era. So
yeah, and I started documenting when I was researching their driver swaps. It was so much. I was like, I'm gonna have to do an episode just on mapping. It's gonna be like the crime shows when you're trying to dot all the I's. Williams is like that. The number of drivers, like I said, they seasons with 9, 6, 10 drivers just to map driver moves. Across F1 in general, but that's just theirs has been crazy. So I summarized after a couple of years. I summarized it's just a little nuts with them. So in '98, their dominance started to go. They moved to a Mechachrome engine, which is basically old Renaults, and they got third. Then they moved to what's called a Super Tech, which was a rebadged Mechachrome Renault engine, and they got fifth. And then they signed with BMW, and with BMW from 2000 to 05, they got third, second, and then fourth and fifth. And Williams is like, oh, I'm done with this. I'm going to go to Cosworth, which was from way back in the day. Got eighth. I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Toyota. But at that point, he's like, yeah, I kind of regret that I dropped BMW. I shouldn't have dropped BMW.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he got fourth, eighth, and seventh with Toyota. Then they returned to Cosworth, 6th and 9th, then returned to Renault, 8th and 9th. Like it's just all this engine.
Every couple of years they're switching motors.
Yeah. And I was like, I can see why I didn't realize they were that much. Let's not even talk about what was going on with drivers during this time because it was too much to keep up with. I was like, I'm just going to stick with the engine change out because it shows you why they couldn't be consistent, right? Yeah. Then in 2014, they switched to the Mercedes power units, which they've used since then. Yeah. They picked up Martini as a sponsor, which was kind of cool for a few years. They got third, fifth, and fifth. And then in 2018 is kind of when their decline started. Martini left as a sponsor, 10th 2 years in a row in the constructor. Monaco
was when Claire was getting, that's kind of when Drive to Survive came about, and they really were showing the struggle happening at Williams, and Claire, they were like, she should not be leading the team. It's just not going in the right direction.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so they 10th 2 years in a row, the buyout came out in 2020 from a Doralton Capital, which is based in the US. They bought him in August. They acquired him. They kept the Williams name. They actually offered Claire to stay. And she said no. This is the first time the Williams team has not been under Williams leadership in 43 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so it was a pretty
amazing.
big thing. That year they hit their 750th Grand Prix in 2020, and we all know 800th was this year.
Yeah.
So in December 2020, Simon Roberts was the new principal. Jost Capito was the CEO, and they once again hit 10th. 21 8th, 22 10th. That's when Jost resigned, and then James was added as the new principal. Gulf Oil was added as their long-term partnership this year, and then they had their 800th Grand Prix, and they are currently in 7th.
Yes.
And the constructor,
which I think is really good for them, because and especially this year, like they have missed out on some opportunities. Like we've talked about this a lot. Logan's had some bad luck. The car, the last race they should have done better, but there were some issues with the cake plates or whatever they call them near the brake discs, and they could be better. But I mean, good for them. I didn't realize how long they've been in 10th place. How many years? That's sad.
Yeah, that part, it really kind of is horrible. Couple quick things, and then I'm done with them. I thought was interesting is part of the Williams group. Williams Grand Prix Holding is the public name, for it. There's the Williams Grand Prix Engineering Limited, which is the F1 team. They have Williams Heritage, which is a company that takes care of retired chassis and restoration division of Williams F1, comparable to like Ferrari has one of these. I think Alpine, there's a couple other companies that have this type of division that restores the cars and stuff, and also the Williams Driver Academy. So there are some
big names. Yeah, there are a lot of big names in there.
Come up. Yeah. So some names that have come out of the Williams Drivers Academy that I didn't put in there, but I do have it up are Logan Sargent, Lance Stroll, Oliver Rowland, Nicholas Latifi, Dan Ticktum, and Jack Aitken.
Yeah.
So,
and let's not forget about Jamie Chadwick, who's racing in the Indy League right now. And she's doing amazing. She, the race in Nashville, I think she finished up there pretty high. I want to say in the top 10. So their driver academy is really pretty good. And I think they have other women in there as well, but she's probably the best well-known. And I think the Williams Heritage, I think they have like a facility that you could even rent and host things, different types of events there. And they've got a lot for sure going on. But what a history. And what when you think about English racing teams and stuff, like they definitely are at.
Well, if we look at their time this year, I mean, they've had 3 10 or higher finishes, 3 retirements, and so that they're tied with Haas, but Haas is tied with 2 retirements and also 3 top 10 finishes, or 10 or higher finishes. So, I mean, they're doing comparable, but that's not awful. And if we look at their drivers, I mean, Logan we know has been struggling, right? And that's been tough. But Alex is really, really doing a good job, and I think he's got a really good promise. I
feel like he is too. He's for sure an underrated driver in my book. And I think a lot of people are noticing him this year. So I don't remember where I saw it, if it was one of the fan groups or if it was on F1 social media, but they were asking, which driver, you can only pick one driver, which one has stood out. And I just always go through the comments. And a lot of people were saying Alex, but it's like, I also feel you're all late to the party, because I was a huge fan of his when he was at Red Bull for that short time. I was so disappointed that they got rid of him, because I felt like you could see what a good driver he was. And I think now, now that we're seeing that their car is starting to get better, I think we're just going to be seeing him showcase what he can do with a car more and more. So I love Alex. I think he's great. He's fun. He's got an adorable girlfriend. He's got a whole animal menagerie, or his family does. If you don't follow that Instagram page, do so. It's cute.
I think looking back on Williams and seeing how just topsy-turvy they've been with their technology, and I just don't feel they've had enough stability, and when they could get some good stability in their engineering and in the car, I see a lot of good in their future. I mean, if you look at just how many engines they've been through, and you don't even know how many drivers they've been through.
Yeah.
So being able to get not just instability in your engine, and I didn't go into like the chassis and the engineers and all that. If you can get some stability around all of that and driver consistency, it's going to make up a big difference. So to have what little success they've had and longevity with all that instability, it says that they've got a lot of resilience, a lot of resilience.
Exactly. And I do think that James and the group that's there now is they have a vision. And I think we're already starting to see it this year with this being his first year. And, he had said a few months ago, we have other people that we are hiring that we're bringing in. We can't tell you now. So I suspect over the rest of this fall and into the winter, we're going to hear about them bringing more people in. And they're very methodically going about making this the Williams back, in the day that was winning the constructors, or at least up there fighting for it. So I think it's an exciting time for them.
Well, I hope you learned some stuff.
I did. Oh, cool. I thought that was pretty cool. Really good stuff. So thank you for doing all of that work, because I know that's a lot. We don't have a whole lot else. I mean, beyond the grid this week, drivers are just living their best lives. Everybody's on a boat. I mean, I don't think there's
I'm not on a boat.
What?
I'm not on a boat.
Well, this is why they live our lives. No, they're all taking pictures on boats. It's cracking me up. They're at the beach. They're out dancing. They're living their lives. I say great. But the other thing I noticed towards the end of this week, so we don't have a race next weekend. I don't know what we're going to do with ourselves, but then the following weekend we do. So I started to notice towards the end of this week, the drivers posting more pictures with them working out. So they're like, okay, holiday's probably over. I need to start, getting back in shape. Like maybe, I'm sure they've been working out this whole time, but really focusing more on that fitness aspect of it. So yeah, they get to live the life, and I don't know, I'm just over here working. No summer break for me.
I know someone going, I got to check in with them if they're still going, but I know somebody supposedly is going to the race in the Netherlands. So,
oh, fun. You should check with them.
In their suitcase.
Oh my goodness. It's going to be all Max Verstappen fans. I think that's the one race I would least like to go to. Just saying. And then after that, we've got the Italian GP that we've got Monza, and it's like, we talked about going to that, remember? Like a few months ago, we're like, should we go to Monza? Yeah, we should. And then we were like, nah, let's go to more races next year. So yeah, so we've got at least a couple coming up back to back, which will be good. And we'll have to see if Mattia is on the grid. We still haven't had any confirmation about him going to Alpine. So we shall see.
Interesting. Can't wait. Well, and then I might be moving in the middle of all this. So
I wish I could be there to help you. I would totally schlep some stuff for you.
And mine will be like move and then doing like trying to clean. We've decided we would move to begin with because we'll have 2 apartments for 2 months. I just get everything moved over and then spend the weekends like cleaning the old apartments, which is nice and ready. That way it's just easier. Because I don't have as much to move as much as I have to order because I'm in a furnished apartment and have delivered the new place.
Yes.
So.
Yes, that'll be good. They could just bring it up for you.
Yeah. There's that. I guess my internet stuff though, needs to be in one spot. My computers need to be in one spot. I can move a laptop back and forth, but we'll figure it out. Anyway, good to see you. Good to see everyone else. Thanks for coming along the ride. We actually got it done pretty quickly this time for us.
Yeah.
So
yay us. Yay us. But yes, we'll see you next week. No idea what we'll talk about. We'll just chit chat. Maybe some stuff will happen this week. We'll see.
Talk about the flags.
What?
We never talked about the flags. We could talk about the flags.
Oh, we never did talk about the flags. I feel like in my head we did, but we never did. Okay, that's an idea. I like it.
Well,
I like it. Okay.
See you
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and a review. To stay up to date with She Loves the Grid and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram at She Loves the Grid and on Facebook at facebook.com/She Loves the Grid. Thank you for joining us for the ride this week.